Let's go back on the record. And our first speaker this afternoon will be Douglas Darch, and following him will be Professor McCartan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Leland. Good afternoon to you, the members of the board, distinguished counsel who are joining us, guests, and board staffers. I am here today on behalf of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce and the Wisconsin Manufacturers Association. Collectively, these two, that's called a rather dramatic entrance, I believe.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I didn't touch the ground, right, or we'd have to burn it. The combined economies of the states of Illinois and Wisconsin exceed $895 billion, placing it among the roll call of nations at number 17, ahead of the Netherlands, Turkey, Indonesia, and Switzerland, to name just a few. For 30 years, I have practiced before the federal courts and before the National Labor Relations Board, where I have appeared as an advocate in Section 8 proceedings, as well as a representative under Section 9. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, I represented employers in 7 unit hearings involving the appropriateness of units limited to meat department employees. I would like to share that experience as part of my comments. But if you'll indulge me a moment, I need to put the case into context. During the last 30 to 35 years, the retail sale of fresh meats underwent a transformation. The changes made the industry more cost efficient, which is good for the public. And in today's buzzwords, it created many new green jobs. What happened? The NLRB had developed a presumption in the 1930s and in the 1940s that in a retail grocery store, meat department employees constituted a separate appropriate bargaining unit because the butchers in the department employed traditional meat cutting skills. Traditional meat cutting skills were required or applied in the breaking of carcasses of beef and pork into retail cuts of meat. It also back then was a lot of lamb and veal, not so much today. But today, carcass beef is no longer shipped to market. Rather, only boxed beef or case-ready beef is shipped. The traditional meat cutting skills are kept at the abattoirs, and the waste products generated in the breaking of beef, such as fat, inedible tissue, and bone, are kept at the site of the abattoirs as well. The 7 cases I referred to above all involved boxed beef retail stores, which the only work performed in the meat department was similar to the work performed by the deli clerks. One of these hearings eventually resulted in a reported decision. It was Kopp's Food Center, 301 NLRB 398, 1991. And I invite the panel to review the first sentence of that decision. It recites that the case sat for 2 years and 1 week, from January of 1989 to January of 1991, while the board considered the regional director's decision and direction of election. The case is of note because the board reversed the regional director's finding that a separate department of meat department employees was appropriate, and it eventually dismissed the petition. Against that backdrop, I would like to make 3 points. Point number 1, some of the delay that the board is attempting to eliminate here, and I am loath to use that word delay when it involves the processing of petitions, but the case Kopp's Foods illustrates some of that delay is attributable to the board's failure to manage its own internal processes. It appears that under the proposed rules, the board's solution is not to effect changes at the board, but is simply to outsource that process and send it to the regions, or simply cease doing the work altogether. If that work is substantial, as the comments accompanying the proposed rules suggest, there should be layoffs here at the board headquarters. And I can tell you the management community will be alert to see whether layoffs occur. No layoffs means the work was not substantial, and therefore it does not serve as a justification for the rules change. In any event, I trust the board intends to lead by example and has already negotiated with its unions over this tentative decision to subcontract and its effects. Now, to address the proposed rule change in Section 102.66, the introduction of evidence and rights of parties. In a Rule 56 proceeding, the plaintiff, which would be the petitioner in the R hearing, files the Rule 56 motion. The presumption is the defendant wins. Compliance with the law is presumed. The NLRB's proposed procedure turns that presumption upside down. At the NLRB, the petition for unit is presumptively appropriate. Instead of having to overcome a presumption, the petitioner is aided by it. The motion is written, not oral. The parties file briefs, 3 of them, a brief in support, a response, and a reply. The court takes the motion under advisement and may hear oral arguments. In any event, it is only after a period of deliberation that the court issues a decision. Now consider the board's proposed procedure. The hearing officer makes an off-the-cuff decision from the bench after hearing at most oral arguments. There is no opportunity for case study, deliberation, or reflection as to whether there are genuine issues of material fact. The board should not presuppose a hearing officer can adequately address offer of proofs, complicated issues on the fly without benefits of proof. In short, the board is attempting to sacrifice getting it right on the altar of expediency. We urge the board to modify its proposed rule to provide that if the parties dispute the appropriateness of the unit, the hearing officer shall immediately forthwith take evidence on the scope of the unit. Thank you.
I'm completely sympathetic to your description of the delay, which rests at our feet. But I wonder if you think this is accurate in terms of the proposal. The proposal does a couple different things in terms of the board's own caseload. So the proposal suggests that the pre-election request for review would be eliminated. That's a fairly substantial amount of our weekly diet at present. And it proposes not simply that those cases just be shifted to the post-election process, but that many of them, or some of them, will be mooted out because of the election results. So in terms of the delay which is attributable to the board, it does make some sense that if the proposal were to be adopted, the caseload would be constricted in those 2 respects, and hopefully we could do a better job. Doesn't that make sense?
It absolutely does not, sir, and here is why. The reason is that with technology, the board should be able to move its caseload through the process here faster, not slower. It used to be the cases were done on note cards. Now you can use computers. You can do the research online instead of going to the library. You have precedent banks which are found much more quickly. If you've been in the private sector, you will know that there is a huge emphasis on reducing the amount of time spent on research because it's so easy to expedite the process. And this board's staff here has increased in size over the years, so presumably has aged as well, I might add, through my own personal experience with a number of the members, but not of the board, of the staff, excuse me. I want to make that absolutely perfectly clear.
You've aged too.
But one would presume that with experience comes some degree of familiarity and the ability to handle it well. I look at the weekly case reports, and I must say, for a 5-member board sitting, or 4-member, sitting in panels of 3, it's not particularly a heavy caseload compared to what is done, for example, in the Court of Appeals in Chicago, where I practice, and it's your home, I know, but you look at the caseload that comes out of there, and it's much heavier, and they do briefs, and they have oral argument, which the board does not do here. So,
I just want to make one comment. I'm not going to touch your comment about aging, but board staffs have, in fact, quite substantially been reduced over even the 13 years that I've been here, quite substantially. Our board staffs have shrunk enormously, so just wanted to correct that.
I'm not addressing the regions. I'm talking about the headquarters staff.
That's what I'm talking about, too. Quite substantial reduction. I'm sure even since the time former member Cohen was here, his former staff is much smaller than it was when he was here. So any other questions?
Could I volunteer one comment? And
Sure.
that is the rule that speaks of the parties or the petitioner, not the petitioner, the employer, making a recommendation as to the appropriateness of the unit. In the Cops food cases, the parties had sat down and negotiated the appropriate unit before any of the hearings started. When the union was unable to organize in the unit, it then attempted to ignore the petition and ignore the agreed upon unit. And you'll see that that matter is addressed in the board's decision as well, saying that it should not, the union was not bound to its agreement. So the suggestion, I think, that you're proposing here, that by making the employer move forward with a suggestion as the appropriate unit, somehow or other going to speed up the things, I think will only do so to the extent there is, if you will, honor among the parties, and that there will be an effort to abide by that agreement. Otherwise, you're back to 92% of them are stipulated anyway, which I don't think advances the case at all. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.